It's an honor to be here. I ain't gonna lie, last time I was in New York, I almost got cussed out. I had just talked about one good part of a speech that Trump had given. Oh, y'all remember? It's like, glad you raised that, brother. No forgiveness needed. But I was on the subway, and usually, you know, black folk love to see successful black folk, and especially successful black folk on TV. So I'm used to black people being very nice to me, and I was on the subway. And this brother was looking at me like, I was like, how you doing? You know? And he says, don't you raise up off that sucker. I said, I beg your pardon, you know. Got real Ivy League on it real quick. I was like, it's like, au contraire, you know. Don't you raise up off that sucker. And I knew what he meant. Like a lot of people, the fear is overwhelming. The idea that democracy itself is under threat, the idea that we're facing an authoritarian, potentially authoritarian government, and people want to fight and they know they need to fight. But I was disquieted by his way of being in it. And he leaned into me and he said, you trying to be all nuanced. Ain't no room for no nuance. This is good versus evil. Now, that's kind of hard to argue with. You know, you don't want to be on the wrong side of that. But I was proud of myself because I said, well, brother, if this is good versus evil, then let's make sure that we're good. Let's make sure that we're good. And that's what I want to talk about here today. How do we stay good? How do we not become the thing we're fighting? How do we not feed the thing that we're fighting? Since we do have to fight. And I think for the past almost 6 months, that's been a very difficult conversation to have with folks because there's a way that it almost feels unfair. That this fool can say and do whatever he wants, and then we have to sit down and worry about how we're being. And it almost seems naive. And it reminds me, though, of my life at home. I have these two small unemployed people who live in my house. I don't know how they got there. I don't know why they think we work for them. But I have these two small unemployed people who live in my house. And they insist that we drive them to these soccer games and that we sit there the whole time while they basically, especially at first, they just run to the ball and kick each other. You know, this is supposed to be sport. And when they lose a big game, they spend an awful lot of time. I've learned now you just have to give them that 10 minutes. The other team sucks. They cheated. The referee cheated. The Russians. And you just have to let them have that for a moment. But at some point in the car ride home, you have to begin to ask them the question, well, was there anything that we could have done better? Is there anything that we could have done differently. I don't think you're ever going to get to be the championship team just by critiquing the other side. If you're a good parent, at some point you ask the question. And what I'm hoping now for progressives is that we can now at least be in the car ride home and begin to ask ourselves a different set of questions about how we wound up in this situation and what we might be able to do about it. And because I don't have to talk baby talk to you, this is PhD level activism in the room, I don't want to start with November. And I don't want to start with 2016. I want to start with 1968. I want to start with 1968, the year I was born, the year that they killed Bobby Kennedy, the year they killed Dr. King, the year they beat a bunch of young people senseless because they wanted peace. And there was a little idea in 68, mainly in the mind of Dr. King, and it was called the Poor People's Campaign. This idea was so nutty and so terrible and so radical and so shocking that even Dr. King's closest lieutenants didn't want to deal with it, tried to talk him out of it and didn't want it to happen. What was the idea that Dr. King had in 68, which ultimately became the governing majority idea in 2008, 40 years later? It was the idea that African Americans, and as they said at the time, Mexican Americans, and Native Americans, and Appalachians, and students, and women could come together in one campaign and challenge the government as a whole and get redress for fundamental problems of poverty. Dr. King's own lieutenant said, "This is a terrible idea. This idea stinks. It's not gonna work." One of them even said, "Why should I have a Mexican tell me what to do?" This is weeks before the King was killed. The idea that we could all come together and do something, even in Dr. King's inner circle, was not well accepted. We should do civil rights, maybe be against the war, but that's it. 20 years later, that idea found expression in the campaign of Reverend Jesse Jackson with the Rainbow Coalition. And it turned out that Dr. King was more right than wrong, because the Rainbow Coalition, now I would have to say, was intersectional, you see. Oh, see, I go to these colleges now. Oh, I know how to use the language. We didn't say intersectional, we said rainbow in the 80s. But I gotta stay hip. But that Rainbow Coalition almost took over the Democratic Party, didn't it? Yeah. Talking about how blacks and Latinos and women and LGBT and Native Americans and young people could stand together. Almost got the nomination in 88. You act like the first black dude to run for office talking about hope was Obama in 2008, 20 years earlier. Reverend Jackson, keep hope alive in 88, taking Dr. King's dream, his most radical dream, to a different scale. And then finally in 2008, that same little idea in the mouth and the mind of a young senator emerged as the Obama coalition and took over America's government. And not just the White House, the Senate and the House of Representatives, 60 votes in the Senate, 40 years in the wilderness from the time that Dr. King was killed to the time that Obama came into office. But in those 40 years, that idea proved that we are stronger together, that we could govern together, and we got beat real bad despite all that. And I want to talk about the moral challenge of maintaining what was once called the Poor People's Campaign, the Rainbow Coalition, the Obama Coalition. Now it's called the Resistance. There's a moral challenge that we have to face, and it's not new. I had the pleasure of serving in that White House with Obama for a period of time. And when people come up to me and they say, how can you, Van Jones, go sit up in the homes with these Trump voters, these racists, these bigots, these haters? How can you put them on your television show and normalize them and apologize for them and show them empathy and sympathy when they voted and they knew they were voting to hurt everybody you care about? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? It doesn't break my heart for the normal set of reasons. It breaks my heart because I realize that those of us who consider ourselves progressive missed something beautiful that happened. And the moral genius of Barack Obama is this. While we were in office, especially that first year, if you looked at the comment section, Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, Wall Street Journal, N-word, N-word, N-word about the President of the United States. Monkey, monkey, monkey. Ape, ape, ape about the president. If you look at the emails that we got, N-word, N-word, N-word. Monkey, monkey, monkey. Ape, ape, ape. Handwritten letters sent to the White House with the return address on them. Not necessarily the most intelligent people. I'm just saying. N-word, N-word, N-word. It's nothing new. But do you know what we called all those hateful people? Our constituents. Our constituents. And the moral genius of the Obamas is that they risked and lost their congressional majority trying to get doctors to babies in red states and red counties where the parents were calling him a nigger every day. That's what this fight was. That's what this president was. That's what this movement was. Going back to '68. We didn't care who they voted for. We didn't care what their pain or fear or even hatred led them to think, because they were our constituents and we were going to get doctors to babies in those counties anyway. That's who we were. And I love Obama. I love Obama and her husband. Don't leave him out. Don't leave him out. That's wrong. Don't leave him out. But I love Obama because she said, when they go low, we go. When they go low, we go. And when she said it, the convention, 2016, nobody in this room said she was wrong. Nobody in this room said she was a sellout. Nobody in this room said she was turning the country over to fascists. Because that's who you are. You've been that way your whole life. Yeah, you're weird. That's who you are. You love everybody. You don't ask them, do you listen to NPR? Oh, you do? Okay, then I can love you. You've never been that way. Y'all love critters. I'm a Southerner. We call them critters. You call them species. Oh, I go on them campuses, boy. Y'all love species. Y'all love polar bears. And polar bears would eat your butt if they could find you. You would be a skittle to a polar bear. And you out here marching for them, declining. Y'all weird, man. You've been crazy your whole life. Hate to see anybody bullied. Hate it. Hate it when you were a kid. Hate it in your household. Hate it in your school. Hate it on the playground. You had cousins that could watch horror movies. You couldn't watch them. Too sensitive. And now you're going to try to out-ugly Donald Trump. You are not going to succeed. I hate to be rude. It's a moral challenge. It's a moral challenge. And it's a political challenge. The political challenge is very straightforward, but nobody wants to deal with it. On the one hand, you do have one-party minority rule in America. One party, the Republicans, run the House, the Senate, the White House, the Supreme Court, 2/3 of your state legislatures, but they're a minority party. Why? 3 million more people voted for Hillary Clinton than voted for Donald Trump, and 1.4 million more people voted for Democrats to be in Congress than voted for Republicans. But the Electoral College nullified the presidential vote, and all this gerrymandering and voter suppression and nonsense nullified your congressional outcome. So you have one-party rule, but it's a minority party. So it would be very easy to say, well, we're the majority. It'd be very easy to say, well, we have the numbers. Very easy to say they suck. Very easy to say they cheated. Very easy to say the Russians. Very easy to say he's going to be impeached tomorrow anyway, which he's not. And we don't have to do anything but just be mad and righteous. And wait till 2018 or 2020, and then we'll have the House, and we'll have the Senate, and we'll have the House of Representatives, and then we'll show them a thing or two. Here's the problem. That exact formula is called 2009. You literally just did that. You literally just did that. And what did you get? The Tea Party and Donald Trump. So we can do this seesaw all you want to on the Titanic. Or we can try to find a third way out. And that's what this revolutionary love project, and that's what the Love Army, and that's what your congregations and your networks are secretly praying for. That there can be a third way out of this seesaw that we're on as the Titanic goes down. Where do we look now for examples? It's easy to build a movement on the front end that's anti-something. In fact, my entire life on the progressive left has been defined by having movements that were anti-something. Anti-war, anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-pollution. We have gotten so good at defining what we are against that what we are against now defines us. You can't even describe who you are without describing what you are against. That's not freedom. Ask somebody, what are you against? And they will tell you, and get some popcorn. You will get to the bottom of the bucket of the popcorn before they even take a breath. They will explain to you every oppression in the history of oppression, how it works, how it functions, how you need to own your privilege and you too. And by the time you get finished, you say, can I just ask you one more question? What are you for? And you'll hear crickets. What are we for? I think we're trying to build something that's not just a resistance. It's not just another anti. I think there's a deeper calling and a deeper prayer and a deeper hope. I think we're trying to build a pro-democracy movement that can deliver on human rights, that can deliver on sane ecological policy for the children of all species. I think we're trying to deliver on something. And so I sometimes say and do things that get me in hot water. I want you to know I'm going to keep on doing it. Because I think about Nelson Mandela, and I think about Wangari Maathai, and I think about Amilcar Cabral, and I think about the lessons I learned studying them. Nelson Mandela. I can't tell you, by the way, what to do. Some of you guys are so task-oriented, and you come from such dysfunctional families that it all fell on you anyway. And so the main thing you're sitting here with every speech is, well, what am I supposed to do, though? Where's my to-do list? Because that's my safety blanket. Somebody give me something to do. And you're going to be disappointed when I get finished talking, because what I've seen is you do this and you do this and you do and you do and you do, and you end up with a movement with a bunch of doo-doo. That's what I see. So it's not a doo-doo speech. I'm concerned about who we're being first. I'm more concerned about who we're being than what we're doing. We're doing all the right stuff, but we're not being the right people, so when we win, we lose. Nelson Mandela, Wangari Maathai, Amilcar Cabral. Mandela did 27 years in prison. While he was in prison, incarcerated, again, he had a majority. You have a majority. He had a majority. His majority was put down, oppressed, an authoritarian government, incredibly vicious, fascistic, authoritarian, brutal, which is what you fear is coming. How did Nelson Mandela think it through? Who did he be? I'll give you a hint. 27 years in prison, many of his friends murdered. His son died, firstborn son. He couldn't go to that funeral. And as a COSA, he's COSA. That's a huge insult. His mother died, couldn't go to that funeral. Huge insult. His wife was banned to one of the worst townships, to the edge of one of the worst townships. And when he finally got out of prison, he could have been the angriest human ever born, and nobody could have told him anything. You don't get 27 seconds back, let alone 27 years. So this racist, you concerned about racist? This racist, authoritarian, fascist government was forced to let him go, and then forced to meet with him. They said they'd never meet with him. He's a terrorist, he's a communist, we're never gonna meet with him. They forced to meet with him. And so Mandela walks in to the room with all of the ANC leadership. And they sit down across the table from the entire national party government. Embrace for Mandela to tell them what they were going to do and not do, to lay out the pain and struggle of his people. And Mandela in Afrikaans told their story of the Afrikaner people and how they had been able to achieve things and to do things. He talked about their great generals. He talked about their great agricultural achievements. And he said, with a people such as you, I know a just settlement is possible. Everybody in that room knew it was over. Now, 4 more years of blood, sweat, and tears, but it was over. Because you were dealing with an opponent who had a higher opinion of you than you do. You're dealing with an opponent with a vision of a South Africa that has a place for you in it, with more dignity, with more nobility than you can imagine for yourself. You're dealing with an opponent who says, I see a South Africa. I'm coastal, but I can see the Zulus thriving. I can see the Afrikaners with dignity. Come with me there. I'm not calling you out, I'm calling you up to your own greatness. I'm not fighting against you, I'm fighting for you. I'm fighting for you. Nelson Mandela. Wangari Maathai. Planted, everybody, oh, Wangari Maathai, oh, she's so beautiful, she's so amazing. She planted 1 million trees in Kenya. First African woman to ever win the Nobel Prize. Oh, so easy to throw her name out there. Forgot she was beaten. Forgot she was jailed. Forgot that she was planting those trees as a part of a way to network and organize women against the regime. She wasn't just some old Johnny Apple sister. Revolutionary. See, I got jokes, man. Revolutionary African sister. But she said when those soldiers were beating her, in the quiet of her heart, she could already see a time when those same soldiers would be guarding over all those trees. So she addressed them from that place, that this is your motherland and your mothers who you are disrespecting. And sure enough, she wound up serving in government. And my favorite picture of her is with all those soldiers guarding the forests. Now she's in government, and those same soldiers who beat her standing watch over her creation. Do we have a vision? A redemptive vision for the people who we see out here in these streets with these uniforms on? Can we even catch enough breath in our lungs to even say it as a prayer that someday we'll govern? And these people, these blue uniforms, will do something positive for these children out here? Or are you a sellout for even thinking that? Our Cabral. Nobody even knows his name. My father, by the way, my father was Willie Anthony Jones, passed away in 2008. born in poverty, segregation, joined the military to get out of it, put himself through college, married the college president's daughter, my mama, because my dad had it like that. And put his little brother through college, put his cousin through college. He and my mother put me and my sister through college. Love my father. Love my father. I'm a 9th generation American. I'm the first person in my family, though, born with all my rights recognized by this government. I'm a 9th generation American. I'm the first one in my family born with all my rights recognized by this government because of the things that my parents and grandparents fought for. Love my father, but I disappointed him greatly because I didn't name my son Willie Anthony Jones. I named my son after Amilcar Cabral. I had to explain to him why. Amilcar Cabral, a Nelson Mandela-like figure in Guinea-Bissau, a small country in West Africa. Occupied by the Portuguese. As late as the 1970s, the Portuguese still had troops on the ground, brutalizing people, occupying people, napalming people on the African continent. I don't mean the kind of colonization you have now with like treaties and, apps. I mean real colonization. And Amilcar Cabral took up arms to fight because the Portuguese weren't going nowhere without that. And the Portuguese were so brutal. I almost hesitate to describe the brutality, but I have to do it so you understand why I named my son after this man. The Portuguese would cut open pregnant African women and nail the fetuses to trees. They would napalm villages, men, women, and children, to send a message to stop all this revolutionary freedom talk in the Portuguese colonies. And the Portuguese would have maps showing Europe this big and their holdings in Africa 3 or 4 times bigger. Portugal is a great power. They're great because they're oppressing black folk, and they're great because they're holding land and territory in Africa. We might be small in Europe. We may not mean much in Europe, but we're better than these blacks, and we can control them, and therefore we matter. My racism is my identity. It's my source. It's my supply of self-esteem, the Portuguese. And so they would come into those territories and do horrific acts. And Amilcar Cabral would say, go find the soldiers that did this. Take your guns and go get them and bring them before me. And Cabral's soldiers would go all through the bush. And they had a marching style. They could cover tremendous territory, and they could find the unit that had just desecrated this village. And they would bring them back to Cabral over the course of many days. And they would bring them, and he would put them in front. They would put them in front of Cabral. And Cabral would look him in the eyes. And he'd say, have you had any food yet? Have you had anything to eat? No. Give them your food. What? Give them your food. Do you have any injuries? Have you been harmed in any way? Well, he has. Give him your medicine. We only have so many bandages, sir. Use them on him. Let me ask you a question. Why are you here? Why are you here? We have more freedom in our liberated zones than your parents do back in Portugal under the dictator. Why are you here? Let him go. Cabral's men said, this man is insane. We only have this much food, this much medicine, and we're giving it to these butchers. But the moral authority of Cabral was such that he was able to hold together his ragtag army until finally the Portuguese infiltrated a man into his organization named Inocencio, the innocent. And Cabral threw him out because he knew he was a spy, and then Cabral said, no, I'm going to make him in charge of my honor guard. I'm going to put him in charge of my security. And Inocencio killed Cabral. Now, can you imagine what the people of Guinea-Bissau felt? This great leader, this humanitarian leader, this forgiving leader, killed, betrayed. It doesn't work. You go, they go low, we go high, and they kill our leader. They go low, we go high, and they betray us. It's proven. This doesn't work. Except when those young soldiers, those young Portuguese soldiers, found out that Amilcar Cabral had been murdered, they got on boats and they went back to Lisbon. They went back to Portugal, and they overthrew their own government in the Revolution of the Roses. And they freed the Portuguese people, and they turned around and they freed the people of Guinea-Bissau and Mozambique and Angola and Cape Verde. This man freed the Portuguese and the Africans with his example. This man freed the oppressor and the oppressed with his example. Somebody told me love works, but it works in mysterious ways. And it requires a belief that even that butcher, even that black kid on the sidewalk pushing poison, even that person sitting in the hole in San Quentin, rightfully convicted of a crime, even someone who's taken someone's life, is better than the worst thing they've ever done. And that their future is more important than their past. That's tough. But you'll be on this seesaw, back and forth, back and forth. You'll have all the governmental power, and they'll have a backlash against you because they don't think you love them, and they don't think you care about them, and they think that you hate them, and half the time they're right. They can listen to you every time you say white, heterosexual male, that's the bad guy. Every time you say white, heterosexual, cisgendered male, that's the bad guy. Doesn't matter if he's poor. Doesn't matter if he lives in Appalachia. Doesn't matter if he hasn't had work for 4 years. That's the bad guy. We act like love is a finite resource, don't we? Like if we start trying to love some of these white folk, some of these white boys, how are we going to have some love for us? There's only so much love to go around. I need to say something for people worthy, as if we're worthy. As if we're worthy. We have to refuse to be dehumanized. And we have to refuse to dehumanize other people. And we have to trust and believe that if we do that, we open up something in the universe where a miracle can happen. If this is a fight of good versus evil, God help us to be good. Thank you very much.
I love the way you're trying to get us to the third way. Those of us who read geeky church books know that there's a writer named Eugene Peters. Writes books about engaging the powers. And he says Jesus, Rabbi Jesus, was trying to teach about a third way. When he was like, turn the other cheek and that kind of thing, he wasn't really being a wimpy Jesus. He was actually really saying, if you turn the cheek, you're causing a person to react to your dignity. Long story short. Can we talk a little more about the third way?
Both political parties suck.
Yeah. One and two.
And they suck for the same reason.
Yeah.
Hypocrisy is terrible. Let me just say briefly, I'll say something you like and something you don't like. Here's what you might like. The Republican Party was founded to end slavery.
Right.
So in the DNA of the Republican Party is a radical commitment to equality. And if you talk to them, they often present themselves as people who just want some kind of, colorblind, meritocracy, etc. The problem is they have a bunch of neo-Nazis and bigots in their party and never talk about it.
Right, right.
And so even though probably most black people should be Republicans, I'm going to shock you by saying this, but most black people really should be Republicans, not just because of the party of Lincoln, but just look at the two strongest institutions in the black community, the church and hip-hop, okay? The church, religious, the Republicans are religious. Hip-hop, entrepreneurship, hustle, bling, that's kind of Republican. But ain't no black folk gonna join the Republican Party because it's obvious that they don't like black people.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what their origin story is, what their policies are. They don't like black people, and we're not going to, in large numbers, vote for them. Now that makes sense to you. Now let me talk about these Democrats. Ooh. Supposed to be the party of the working people and the FDR and the struggling and striving. And you can be a part of the Democratic Party as long as you eat kale, like yoga, listen to NPR, and all of that. But if you don't get all the polysyllables right, you'll be thrown out and talked bad about. We have a party that's supposed to be for the ordinary people. We have a bunch of snobs and elitists in the party, and nobody wants to talk about that. So both parties suck, and they suck for the same reason. It's the hypocrisy and the fact that the struggling and striving underdogs at the bottom are always, the Democrats like some and insult others. They like the Muslims and the Mexicans and the Black Lives Matter, whatever, but they insult those working class white dudes all the time and then want them to vote. And then the Republicans like all the poor white people. They don't do much for them, but they like them. And then they insult all the poor black and brown people, and then they say that we don't vote for them because we're lazy and want entitlements and free stuff. And so both parties suck. So what we have to do is come up with a third way out that respects all the struggling, striving folk.
Right.
That can love that struggling, striving white guy as he is. Not I love you after I can brainwash you to think like me. I love you anyhow. Saying crazy stuff, being mean to people. Fundamentally, I love you. Now, we're going to have some arguments. And I'm going to vote against you every time as long as you're voting crazy. But you can tell when somebody loves you. You can't lead a country you don't love. You can't lead anybody you don't love. In fact, if I come up to you right now and say, you suck, and everything you do is horrible, and even your intentions are horrible, follow me.
That kind of doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
But if I say, you're amazing, and I want you to be even more amazing, I'm called a consultant, right? And I can make a lot of money with the same advice and feedback. So if we're showing up every single time with this group of people, and all we say about them is that they suck, they're not going to follow us. They might click around into the Hillary Clinton's website and find some policies that they should like. They still not going to vote for us because your dignity won't let you vote for people who look down on you.
Right.
So,
the third way then is finding the inherent dignity in the other. One piece of it, right? Being able to say, also then reshuffling something that's gotten concretized around race, which is to say, at some point, poor people would be natural allies one to each other. At some point, disenfranchised people would be allies one to the other. But when class gets raced, then the poor white people will do anything to not be black. The poor Latino people will just like, they don't want to join in either. So there's something about class and race that keeps us in prison.
you know what, I try, because some of these conversations become so freighted now with so much discussion. I just talk about pain.
Pain.
Let's talk about pain.
Talk about it. I love that.
Common pain should lead to common purpose.
Beautiful. Common pain should lead to common purpose.
That's what I think.
Tweet that. That's
so
good.
when I go to West Virginia,
Yeah.
you know, I work for CNN, so I get a chance to go all kinds of places. I go to West Virginia. Poverty,
Yeah.
addiction, high death rates. Then I go to south side of Chicago, west side of Chicago. Poverty, addiction,
Right.
high death rates. Then I go to the reservation. Then I go to Arizona, the border. And then I go to poverty, addiction, high death rates. Common pain,
Common pain.
but no common purpose. Why? The Democrats in the blue cities and the blue states say, well, at least we're not racist and bigoted to the poor, to the people of color. But they don't do anything about the poverty, the addiction, or the high death rates. But they just say, well, vote for us because we're not them. Then the Republicans do the same thing. Red counties, red states, white folk just as poor as they ever been. White men are the only people in the country whose life expectancy is going in reverse
Right.
because the opioid epidemic is bigger than the AIDS crisis at the height. More people are dying of accidental deaths of opioid addiction in America today than were dying of HIV at the height of the AIDS crisis. More people are dying of opioid addictions in the United States today, accidental deaths, than are dying in car crashes today, right now. Overwhelmingly, this population in Ohio and West Virginia and Pennsylvania. And Trump comes out with his utter brilliance and has a Trump care plan or a Trump don't care plan that lets the insurance companies off the hook for treating addiction at all. So My point is simply this. The Republicans, I'm just saying what you said, I'm just saying it slightly differently. The Republicans say the cure to your pain is being mean to all these black and brown people and Muslims and whatever else, which doesn't work.
Right.
The Democrats say the cure to your pain is at least don't vote for these terrible bigots, which at the end of the day doesn't work. And then we don't even know each other. I want for us, at least on the question around addiction, why don't we have a crusade out of Black America, out of South Central, where some of our best leaders have been dealing with the addiction crisis for 30 years? We should put them on airplanes and take them to West Virginia so we can sit down together and figure out how to help each other and how to hold each other. That's a third way out. And then, well, that's not going to change their votes, man. My God, Van Jones used to be hard. I don't care who they vote for. I'm going to shock you. I don't care who they vote for. Not right now. I don't care who they vote for. You know how many times you get to vote in 4 years? Once. Once. What about the other 3 years, 12 months, 11 months? Somebody better at math than me. But what about all the other days? We just supposed to wait around and vote against each other again? That's what we're supposed to be doing? I don't love the Trump voters to change them. I don't love the Trump voters so that they will be different people. I love them so that Trump doesn't change me. I don't want to be a worse person. I want to be better and not bitter. I'm trying to save me. I don't want to become him. So I will listen. If you have black lung disease and you're a coal miner and you're living in West Virginia, and as is happening right now, your health care is being thrown in the garbage can, I want to fight to get a doctor to you so you can vote against me for a long time.
Amen.
I don't want you to die before you get to voting against me again. It's a democracy. Vote however the hell you want to vote. But I'm not going to live in a country where somebody can be a miner and go down in a hole 2 miles, 3 miles, and then walk bent over 4 miles to get coal, to keep the lights turned on for me and you, and then come out with black lung disease and not be able to see a doctor. I'm not going to live in that country. I don't care who they vote for. What kind of people are we to sit up here and worry about that in the first place? People dropping dead of opioid, dropping dead in the kitchens in front of their children, and you're worried about who they're going to vote for? Presidents have a lot of power spiritually. When JFK was president, everybody wanted to join the Peace Corps. Reagan was president, everybody wanted to go to Wall Street. Obama was president, everybody said, well, let the gay folk get married, and even Republicans, we ain't gonna fight about it. Trump is president, now everybody's an asshole. I'm not going for it. I'm not going for it. I'm not. You have to go harder. When it gets harder to love, love harder. When it gets harder to love, love harder. That's what we have to be about. That's the third way out. And a movement like that, the vote will take care of itself. They might vote for Republicans, but the Republicans they vote for might be different. At some point, I bet there's going to be Democrats and Republicans here 20 years from now. I don't think we're going to have a one-party system. And so let's try to find a way to just reduce the inflammation. We don't have to agree. We're not supposed to agree. Dictatorship, you have to agree. Democracy, you don't have to agree. You're supposed to disagree. That's the whole point. It's called freedom. But you're supposed to try to understand.
Yeah.
You're supposed to try to understand. And that's the third way out.
We'll leave it right there, Van. That's
Thank
awesome.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thank you.